Okay, we are live. Welcome everyone to the VR Bytes EDU webinar presented by Bytespeed. If you're joining us on the recording afterwards on YouTube, hi, it's great to see you watching either live or after the fact. We've got an awesome presentation lined up for today, kind of jumping back into the swing of things with virtual reality now that schools are starting to plan for this fall, maybe exploring some solutions with some of the funding that's out there of different ways to engage their student body and the different populations within their schools that maybe haven't had a chance to use VR in the past. So we have Christine Lyon Bailey here. I'll let her kind of introduce herself and kick things off. But I will encourage anybody watching us live to use the chat or the Q&A function. If you have questions that pop up during the webinar here today, or if you want to leave a comment on the YouTube video if you're watching after the fact, we'd love to answer any questions that you have and really have an open dialogue today. But with that, I'm going to turn things over to Christine and we'll get started.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because my intro is actually embedded in my slides. All right. All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about supporting our special needs students through the use of emergent technology. So this is me. I'm not blonde in the picture, but I am now. So I'm Christine Lyon Bailey. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer and one of the founders of Ready Learner One. We're an innovative learning solutions provider. So we work with school districts, colleges, and corporate clients on teaching and learning in all different venues, but we were kind of born out of emergent technology and focusing on AR and VR, which is how we met the great folks at Bytespeed. I'm also a director of technology and innovation and an elementary school principal in the Morris Plains School District in New Jersey. And I'm an adjunct professor at Ramapo College in New Jersey, where I teach instructional technology to our pre-service teachers. So it's really fun to help sort of shape the technological approach of their instruction as they get ready for the classroom. I do have two books if you're interested. One is called Reality Bytes, and the other is the Esports Education Playbook, one that I know is near and dear to Josh's heart since he has a chapter in the book. And shameless plug, since we're going to talk about VR, Reality Bytes is available on Amazon and published by DBC. We have the greatest publisher ever. So with that said, I know it's probably unnecessary. However, you never know when you have people in the audience that are not familiar with the concept of AR and VR. So we'll take 2 seconds to quickly define the difference between the two technologies. So you may remember something like this. Probably not. So if you're actually thinking back to your childhood, you might remember something that looks a little bit like this, the old ViewMaster. And so VR is when we take our current reality and we totally replace it with something totally different, totally new. And we're going to talk a lot about VR today and how we can use it to support our special needs students. But we're also going to talk a little bit about AR, and that's taking our current reality and enhancing or adding to it or augmenting it. So augmented reality. And there's 3 different types, target-based, location-based, and device-based. So today we'll talk mostly about target-based and device-based. But to give an example of location-based, it's like that Pokemon Go game that everybody was so obsessed with, where you had to like really make sure that you were watching the road when you were driving in case somebody was chasing something. So that's just a good example of location-based. So this is just a fun little activity. So if anybody's playing along right now, if you scan that QR code, you can actually experience what some target-based AR is like. That will actually pop up some web-based AR from hosted by Eighth Wall, and you can actually throw money at a robot because I know that's what everybody wants to do right now. So you can throw hundreds of millions of dollars at a robot. None of it is real, so don't get too excited. All right, but in the interest of time, so when we wrote Reality Bytes, I wrote Reality Bytes with my 2 co-founders of Ready Learner One, Micah Shippey and Jesse Lubinsky. And what we did is we actually built out a framework for how we can use AR and VR in the classroom. And it's important to note that because I just want to share quickly what that framework is. It's the ABC framework, and it's absorb, blend, and create. And the reason I share it with you right now is because as we talk about how we use these technologies with our special special needs population, we're going to talk about how kids can consume or absorb content, how they can manipulate their environment, blend what's given to them through either the augmented or virtual reality to create outcomes. Or they can create something entirely new, like, for example, in an experience that we'll talk about that relates to like an art therapy approach. So these three, we call them styles of adoption, not levels of adoption, are relevant no matter who you're talking about. You could be talking about your general education population, your gifted population, your special needs population. They're relevant in all aspects of education, both in the K-12 level and the higher ed level, and ultimately when you get to more of a corporate or professional world learning environment as well. So let's talk a little bit about immersive skills, because this is a really great way to teach skills, not just to our special ed population, but also to our gen ed population. So some of the things that we're able to embed in these learning experiences is increasing motivation, right? So very oftentimes our special ed students are challenged with being motivated learners because it's difficult for them, right? And the more difficult something is, the less likely we are to give it our all, right? Because it becomes very deflating when we're not successful. So increasing motivation for students, regardless of what their needs are, whether they're special needs, general education, gifted students, it doesn't matter. That's always a great skill or opportunity to provide for a student. Facilitating interaction is another thing that we can do through the use of VR and AR. Developing cognitive skills, we can improve short-term memory for students. We can certainly engage learners, which goes hand in hand with increasing motivation, right? The more engaged we are, the more motivated we are to participate. Improve communication and facilitate social interaction. So as we talk about different experiences and different types of learners today, these are different skills that you'll see tapped into. So let's talk a little bit about ADD and ADHD quickly. And all of these like facts and statistics, all of the materials that I pulled them from are on the last slide. So you'll be able to access all of this if you're interested in the articles or the case studies that I referenced in the presentation. So there are 5.7 million children diagnosed with ADD and ADHD. That's a lot of learners, right? That's a lot of kids that we have to figure out, well, how do we help these kids to be most successful in their learning environment? And so introducing augmented and virtual reality into their learning environment can actually aid them in focusing, which is often the biggest challenge for an ADD or an ADHD child. Because what we're able to do is hone their focus and exclude the environmental distractions. Definitely with VR, but also with AR. It can be done in both ways. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some tools that we can use to do that. The attention, so this is just an interesting fact that was in a study by Naveen Joshi, which is the founder of Alarin. Attention spans of children born in the age of digital technology are decreasing rapidly. The brains of young children are constantly exposed to stimulation due to smartphones, social media, the internet, and AR and VR can prove to be a feasible solution for all of these problems. So I just think this is so interesting because we so often blame the technology for the fact that students have grown so accustomed to this concept of instant gratification, right? And the inability to have a long attention span. But then at the same time, we're saying, well, technology might also be the solution. Right. So it's really not necessarily about the technology itself, but it's about what we're doing with that technology and what they're doing with that technology and how we're presenting it to the students. So I just think that's so important. One of my favorite lines that I say every time I present on anything tech, which is almost everything I present on, is technology is only as good as what we're doing with it. Right. And so this is a perfect example of let's take the technology that we're so quick to blame and let's flip the script and make it the support for the student. So for one example is Microsoft has the Immersive Reader product, which is a VR application. So now you can actually read in a virtual space, right? So a student with ADD might be sitting in a classroom and there's a billion little external distractors going on, right? Somebody's chewing gum next to them loudly. Somebody just threw something in the trash can. The kid 3 rows up is tapping their foot. There's people walking by in the hallway. The sound of the HVAC system is humming. The computer is whirring. And now this student is sitting there. They're trying to focus on reading. And there's all these external stimulants that are distracting. But if we can put them in this VR experience, this virtual space where they can focus on their reading, and we've eliminated all of those external distractions, they can be a lot more successful. So just one tiny example of how we can leverage the technology. So another example of how we can support our ADD and ADHD students is through providing them with a calming environment. And this is something that we've done in our schools. So our school district is a pre-K to 8th grade school district. It's very small. We have about 600 students. For the other 49 states that might be tuning in right now, New Jersey has over 600 school districts in our tiny peanut of a state. And so we are all most of us are very small districts with very small populations. So if you're watching right now from a county-based system, you probably think I'm out of my mind. Your one building has more kids than our whole district does. But in our district, we are very privileged to have 3 high-end HTC Vive setups, thanks to our partnership with Bytespeed. Actually, they were the vendor that we were able to start our VR journey with. And one of the experiences that we often provide for our students is this experience called the Blue. And the Blue is an underwater exploration experience, but it's very calming, right? So think about when people have babies, right? And they get those sound machines so that the baby sleeps at night, and it has like a million settings, but half of those settings are the sounds of water, right? Waves or water movement or waterfall or raindrops, because it's a very calming sound. And so having a calming environment for a student who is otherwise struggling to focus can be really helpful. So I'm just going to quickly show this little video to give you an example of what the Blue is like. I mean, who doesn't love a turtle? So imagine being in a headset and you're experiencing this environment, and it's 360. So you can move around, you can interact, you can walk along the shipwreck. The stingray literally swims past you. You can walk through the pod of jellyfish. And it's just this really calming, sort of therapeutic experience for students who may be struggling to find a way to calm themselves and to focus within their school day. So that's just one example of a VR experience you can leverage with your students. Oh, we're going to just keep playing. There we go. Now, to take it to a totally different aspect, right? A lot of our students with special needs, and really mostly our ADD and ADHD students, really benefit from hands-on engagement, right? A lot of students need hands-on engagement, regardless of what kind of a student you are. The more we can engage students in hands-on learning, the more in tune they become to what they're actually doing, and the more that they're processing their learning. So there's a lot of great augmented reality experiences that we can leverage in order to provide students with that type of an experience. One example is Jigspace. So Jigspace is an AR app. So again, instead of having a headset, you just need a device in your hand, and it creates an augmented experience right in your learning environment where students can interact with different, they call them jigs, but it's kind of like an engineering and design experience where you're exploring different creations or different inventions and how they work and how they function. So one of my favorites is how does a lock function on a door, and what are the mechanics of a lock? And you can actually take the lock apart and put it back together and see how the mechanics work. And then Jig actually has another app called Jig Workspace where the students can design their own jigs, their own inventions, and they can test it, go through the engineering and design process, go through an iterative process, make modifications to it, and test their prototypes. So it's a really great way of what maybe once was writing a paper about something or putting together a slide deck. Now we're actually physically building items in a virtual environment and testing those prototypes. And that's really powerful. Another great app, probably one of my all-time favorites, is Catchy Words. And Catchy Words is a kinesthetic app. So we get up and we move around with it, that encourages users to interact with words and letter sounds. So I'm actually going to go on to this slide because I want to show you an example of it. Jamie Donnelly put together this really great video that shows it. So I'm going to play it and I'm going to talk a little bit while it's playing. Let's see. So what Catchy Words does is it's great for students with dyslexia who we need to practice the the letter directions and the letter blends and how letters align to create words. So what happens is you type a word in, you can work from a predisposed list as well. They appear in a bubble, and then you physically use your device to pop the bubble, and your device becomes a magnet where you pick up the letters like she does right now, and you drag them to the box, almost like Wheel of Fortune style, if you will. And you create or generate the words that you're working with. This is a great way to reinforce spelling conventions for students, especially early phonics learners, letter blends, letter sounds, digraphs, all of those types of learning that are really difficult when you're doing a traditional paper and pencil spelling test. Now we can make it interactive for our students that need to move while they learn, our students that maybe can't sit still in their seat to take a 20-word spelling test. We can get them up and moving in this kinesthetic type of learning experience. So it's a really great app. It's free, it's fun. I strongly encourage everyone to check it out. So social skills is another skill set that a lot of our special education students really struggle with. And to be totally honest, a lot of our gen ed students do as well, right? And so finding a way to bridge that gap for students with regards to social skills is really critical. And it's something that our society is very aware of. In 2018, the US Department of Ed Office of Special Education Programs actually invested $2.5 million into developing programs for students to work on social skills. So this is something that as a society, we see a great value in. So the VR opportunities to integrate social skills, the VOISS, developed virtual situations for students with high functioning autism. And some of those simulations included how to work with, how to talk to, and how to collaborate with peers. And while it was geared toward high functioning autism, it really does benefit all and any of our students, both with special needs, but also our gen ed population that maybe just struggles with social skills, right? There are plenty of kids out there that just don't have the confidence or don't read social cues in a way that sets them up for success. And what's really great about it is when in the experience itself, you can actually walk up to and interact with computer-driven avatars, and depending upon how you interact with them, they will read and respond either with negative or positive interactions so that the student is able to process and reflect upon and assess the way they interacted and what the effect was of that. So it's like a cause and effect learning experience. It's a really great way for us to teach children what the implications are or what the effects are of the way that they interact with their peers and also with adults. Oops, sorry. Another great social skills app that can be used, and this one is available both on a tablet or immersively, but on the tablet, it's super easy to use. It's called MoteVote. And what it does is it empowers student voice. So I can try to explain this because I've tried many times, but I'm going to play the video because they're going to do it much better than I am. So you actually create a virtual environment.
Build a little farm.
I'll build some fences.
Click and drag the items into it.
Nice fences. How about a chicken coop?
And then you tell the items what you want them to do. So you tell the chicken,
That looks great.
go into the coop, and the chicken will enter the coop.
Cows.
Watch what happens with the cows.
Cows dance. Add some people.
People milk cows. Nice.
So what's really great is this encourages two different things. One, it empowers student voice, right? So for our students that are often maybe a little bit more selective about when they will and will not use their voice to interact in the classroom, it empowers them to use their voice and see what the reaction is to using their voice. So for example, the kindergarten student who will not speak at school, speaks at home, will not speak at school. But when given an opportunity to interact with something like this, which is fun and engaging, and she sees that when she tells the cows dance, she starts to realize the power that her voice has, which is really quite magical when that skill transfers into the classroom. And now that child becomes an active participant in the classroom. The other benefit to this is teaching students how to give clear and concise directions, right? So a lot of times, if you think about it, I had a perfect example. I had a first grader come to the office today, needed photocopies made, 5 photocopies of the front side of the paper. Took about 10 minutes to understand what the child needed, because they didn't say, please make 10 copies of the front piece of paper. It was, well, Mrs. So-and-so has 9 students that didn't bring their paper to school today and one got crumpled. And, it's like this long convoluted story. And by the time we got to what we needed, it was 10 minutes later. So this is a great way to teach students how to give that clear and concise piece of information, which is a really important life skill, and something that can be taught through the use of this type of technology. So twofold, really fun experience, super easy for kids. It's called Moat Boat. Oops, you don't want to watch it again. Sorry. Okay, so talking a little bit more about autism specifically, because while social skills is an issue for many students, it's definitely a struggle for students with autism. So there's a lot out there that we can do to support students with autism through the use of emergent technology. So we're going to talk a little bit about sensory training. Sensory training in VR is really powerful because it's a safe sensory environment. So when we think about autistic students and we think about all the different sensory triggers that they struggle with, we can mimic some of those triggers, but in a very controlled way, so that we can start to build the student's ability to sustain themselves in an environment that might have those triggers, right? How to accommodate those triggers, how to make sure that they're controlling those triggers. So being able to mimic a sensory environment that's safe for them and controlled is a great way to teach them how to overcome some of those challenges. Also, social interactions. So our students with autism often learn by repetition of practice, right? So think about how ABA, for example, ABA instruction is all about repetition, the same thing over and over and over again, because that's how those types of students learn best. So being able to continuously mimic a repetitive social interaction so that those children can learn how to be successful in those environments, like, my name is Christine, what's your name, right? How many times do we have to go through that routine with a student before they're able to mimic that same skill set outside of the environment in which they learned it? So being able to do that through the use of virtual reality can be really powerful. Also, higher level risk taking, right? So creating a risk-free environment where there isn't fallout from taking risk. So being able to use my voice, if I'm a high functioning autistic student and I am able to use my voice, but I don't feel confident because that's a risk I'm not willing to take, which kind of goes along with the next one, creating that no judgment zone. Now I'm empowering students to take risk and to see what it feels like to take that risk and find that success in an environment that's not going to be judgmental and is not going to shut them down, based upon reaction. And then also job skills, teaching skills through repetition, basic skills, right, is so critical for some of our most challenged learners. And so we're able to do all of that through the use of virtual reality, where we may not otherwise be able to do that in a traditional school environment. A lot of schools do have like that job-based studies, right, when they get to higher, high school level and that up to age 21 instruction. But we can start much younger through the use of virtual reality. We're not going to take our 4th graders, to the grocery store to learn, life skills. That's not practical, but we can do things like that right in our classroom through the use of the technology. So let's take a look at, I love this. So this is a student, it's actually a news briefing about a student who is autistic, and the parents wanted to take the child on a trip, and they couldn't because they did not know how their child would handle the process of traveling on an airplane, right? This was an autistic child who would really struggle with all of those sort of unknowns. So this is a really amazing story. So I'm going to go ahead and play it for you.
Good Monday morning. If you think modern day virtual reality is just for gaming, think again.
That's right. New technology is helping those with developmental disabilities do more than ever before, and much of that can be found right in our own backyard.
You might remember VR1, the virtual reality arcade that was featured as a Made in Idaho piece a few weeks ago. You might not know that VR1 caters to everyone and anyone and isn't just for hardcore gamers.
I'm the proud father of a 10-year-old son with autism. And we came down to VR1 just simply out of curiosity.
Mitch's son Nathan has had problems with socializing and other everyday tasks that most of us take for granted all of his life. Traveling had been an issue as Nathan had never been on an airplane.
My wife and I were apprehensive about the isolation and what could happen if it were to go wrong.
But Nathan took a liking to virtual reality at VR1, where he'd travel the world from a bird's eye view on Google Maps or simulate flying on YouTube. After months of simulations, the family finally bought their plane tickets to see Nathan's aunt.
His excitement was so incredible. Getting ready, walking down the runways, going through security. Sat down, plane got ready to take off. We got in the air, he looked out the window and turned around and said, "Daddy, it looks just like VR1." From there, it was just so positive.
Nathan is just one of many individuals that's making positive strides in their life, something the owner of VR1 sees often.
We do something called exposure therapy, and so that carries over to people who have fear of spiders, fear of heights, and then specifically all the kids with autism.
Smythe says Nathan and several other autistic individuals all loved virtual reality from the get-go with nothing but positive experiences.
The autistic mind, as it is, has a fascination with technology, and as we've seen in the past, there's some of the best creators, designers, game developers have some sort of autism.
For Nathan, it started with travel and movie simulators, which helped him get on an airplane for the first time. But since then, he's kept expanding into other everyday situations, like socializing and problem solving.
That now has evolved into him playing something like Budget Cuts, which is a game where an enemy or a bad guy can come and interact with you, which can be very fearful. And he's responding to that, and he's defending himself and going through this maze and unlocking new doors, and I don't think he would have gotten into a game like that right off the bat. This is something that he's kind of gotten more comfortable with.
VR has many of the same effects that hours of specialized therapies could provide for autistic individuals, all while making them feel like they're simply playing a game. Sometimes therapy, or more commonly everyday situations, can cause sensory overload, but despite how advanced virtual reality is, it seems to do the opposite.
We see a calming effect when he comes out of virtual reality. Even while he still has the headset on, he's kneeled down or even laid down in the booth. And coming out, he's much more relaxed, to the tune of him being exhausted or needing a nap.
And it doesn't end there.
I see unlimited potential inside of their minds. I see us being able to unlock a certain person who can achieve things that we never thought could be done. And all of this can happen off of just exposing them to virtual reality.
Isn't that great? I mean, that's just amazing. That's unbelievable that this child and their family had this amazing experience, and that's just one child, right? And so what we can do for students using virtual reality, both our autistic students and all of our students, in unlocking these opportunities for them, is just really super powerful.
Good Monday morning.
Oh,
if you think
sorry. Okay, so that one's very similar, but
technology like virtual reality.
So what's really great about virtual reality is we can also do the reverse, right? So we don't only need to use it to empower our autistic students to be able to start to establish these sort of skill sets that will help them to navigate society, but we can also teach our non-autistic students what it's like to live in the world of an autistic student, so that we can start to build acceptance and understanding toward peers, which is really powerful. So I won't play this whole video for you, because it's very difficult to watch, but it's also very long. But this was developed to give students or anybody who doesn't have autism an understanding of what it's like to be in an autistic person's shoes. So it's actually a 360 video. And autistic people actually helped to develop this video, just so you know. So there is some video to it. So it's supposed to mimic an autistic person standing in the mall. This person is buying a ticket, and it's a 360 video. So it's like a form of virtual reality where we can navigate around the environment. So you'll notice there's like a loud wet sound, and this lady just spilled something. The sound of the cane is very loud. The lights are flashing. So it gives the understanding of what a person with autism may be experiencing in an environment like that, where as some of our gen ed students would walk through a mall like this and wouldn't even think twice about it, right? They wouldn't notice the lady mopping up the water or the woman walking with the cane, because all of those things are just, you know, typical, and they don't create this extreme stimulant for most of our population. So the reverse of being able to teach about autism awareness is another really powerful way to support our special needs students by empowering our other students to understand where those students are coming from. Oops. So in addition to serving specific need populations, another really great use of virtual reality in schools with our special needs students is art therapy. And not just for our special needs students, it could be for any student that may need some kind of a therapeutic approach. There was actually a study done at Drexel University. They had 27 participants, and the 27 participants each spent 25, all people who do art therapy on a regular basis, and they spent 25 minutes in a experience called Tilt Brush, which I'll show you in a moment. And it's basically a VR art experience. So you're in an infinite palette, an infinite canvas, and you have a palette of infinite brushstrokes and colors, and you create your art around your environment. It's basically a 360-degree canvas. And so they allowed these patients of therapy to go into a tilt brush environment and spend 25 minutes creating. And then when they were finished, they needed to save their art, and then they debriefed with their therapist afterward to talk about what the experience was like. And some of the things that they said was they were able to escape to a different world, one of creativity and freedom. One person reported feeling energized and elated by the experience of being in an imaginal space that was unlike anything that existed in the material world. So it was very therapeutic for them to sort of leave the material world and be able to be part of this environment where they were creating everything in their sight. So the study results actually said that the unique characteristics of art therapy in VR were identified as positive emotions, play and exploration, learning and mastery, access and storage. VR has the potential to enhance psychological health and well-being through creativity, enhanced imagination, interactivity, and problem solving. So that's pretty awesome, because that's a really great way that we can provide some really immersive art therapy in our schools. And so this is what Tilt Brush looks like, and we can create all sorts of things in Tilt Brush. And Tilt Brush actually aligns with VR Create, which is part of the framework that I talked about in the beginning of the session. And so I'll just show you really quickly what it looks like to create in Tilt Brush, and then I'm going to share a really powerful story about an experience we had with a student in our district. But this is what it's like to be in Tilt Brush. So she's an artist. She's going to put her headset on. And now this is what she sees. She's just in a completely empty canvas. So cool. I mean, I love good art, so I think it's really cool. But we have a student in our school who is nonverbal, who really struggles to express themselves, but art is a way of expressing themselves. And so what we've done is we actually provided that student with the opportunity to express themselves through art when they were experiencing some frustration. And then we went and we were able to look at that art after the fact. And that child was able to express emotions that verbally were impossible for that child to provide, right? And so through the different colors they chose and how the brush strokes were developed and the different directions in which the art was going, it was clear to anyone that the child was feeling angry and frustrated. And so it was just a really great way to use art to give a student voice who otherwise doesn't have a voice that they could use. So I really think that there's a very powerful path for art therapy in schools through the use of virtual reality, and I'm excited to explore that more. Oops. Another really great way that we can use VR with our special needs students and all of our students, to be honest, right? But a lot of times our special needs students may have limited travel abilities, right? Whether maybe they are struggling with physical handicaps or behavioral issues that prevent them from being able to participate in, you know, our more traditional type of field trips. Even though I feel like after the pandemic, I don't know how many traditional field trips we'll see anymore, unfortunately. But the use of Google Earth is a great way to provide field trips to any student, whether they're a student who, you know, has special needs or just a general population of students. And being able to take students anywhere in the world is really powerful. And being able to explore different regions that we're learning about, whether they align with social studies or, you know, you go drop a student in the middle of Manhattan and look at the scale of buildings to city blocks to explore math concepts, right? Or, you know, into a city in Europe that aligns with a novel that you're reading in terms of setting. There's the sky is the limit in terms of how you can connect geographical locations in our world to what our students are learning. And being able to provide that to all students, especially students who maybe otherwise wouldn't be able to travel, whether it be for financial reasons or because of their needs or whatever it may be. Google Earth is a really great way to provide those opportunities for students. And then the last app or experience that I wanted to really talk about is AltSpace VR. And AltSpace VR is just one example of many, but this is a social VR experience that students can be in. So by going into a headset, you can create an avatar of yourself and then you can interact with other folks. So for example, Josh and I could both have our headsets on. We go into AltSpace and there's all different like rooms and environments, and we would have our avatars and we can actually speak to each other and hear each other and interact with each other. But it's kind of in a safe, controlled environment, right? Because I'm sort of hiding behind my headset, but I'm learning appropriate social cues and interactions. I'm learning to wait my turn in a conversation. If Josh is talking and I'm moving my head around and looking in a million different directions, I'm learning how I need to be paying attention to the person who's speaking to me and waiting my turn in conversation and having appropriate interactions through that social environment. So social VR is a really powerful way also for us to start teaching our students how to interact in environments beyond our microcosm of a classroom where everything is controlled and structured. And we're really not mimicking the real world for students in those environments. So we can leverage the technologies to start to mimic more of that for them. So that's everything. Or maybe it's not, maybe it's just the beginning, to be totally honest with you. But please, you know, if you have any questions, you can always email me. You can connect with me on Twitter and Instagram at @CLyonBailey. And it was really a pleasure to chat with you all today about this topic. And I wish you all the very best.
Thanks so much, Christine. That was awesome. And thank you for kind of walking us through some of those examples. We did have one really good question pop up towards the beginning of the presentation from Landon Allen here. With Google ending support for Google Expeditions, we're left with a ton of phones and goggles. We're not sure what to do with them. What recommendations do you have for young learners? How can we repurpose these to allow students to continue engaging with VR?
Yeah, so that's a really great question, and one that a lot of people are really frustrated with. So, you know, those phones and tablets can be used for so many augmented reality experiences. I mean, sky is the limit. And the beautiful thing about AR is it's almost all free. Very few of the apps actually require purchase. And so, you know, some of the apps that I talked about today, but if we're talking about just general, you know, apps in general, there are just so many different things that you can use them for. Google Expeditions Expeditions actually has a whole AR component to it as well. There's great apps out there like BBC Civilizations. That's like it's basically like a museum at your fingertips, right? You can bring an Egyptian mummy right into your classroom and you can look at it in scale compared to, the desks in your room. And there's just a lot of great AR opportunities, and also web-based VR opportunities that you can use those devices for. And, feel free to send me an email and I can send you, we actually have a list of all different experiences that you can leverage for repurposing some of the technology you have from the retired expedition kits. So I'm happy to share that.
Awesome. No, that's great. And it kind of seemed like a lot of the experiences that you were talking about early on in the presentation, you could do also in virtual reality, but also with that augmented reality template, which I think is great. We have a variety of devices. Maybe a school is just getting started and exploring what VR is out there or what applications that they can jump in with. And if you've got this technology with phones or AR already at your fingertips, it's a good way to kind of dip your toe in the water and see if, okay, this is something that we want to explore more, maybe get a VR headset or something a little bit more immersive, but a great place to start for sure.
Absolutely.
Wonderful. Well, I think with that, we're going to call it for the day, but I want to say thank you to everybody who popped in and out during the live webinar. We appreciate you joining live with us during this Wednesday afternoon. And for everybody that's watching on YouTube, thanks again for supporting us on social media. Christine's information's on the screen here. Please feel free to reach out to her or the team here at Bytespeed. We'd love to talk with you about any questions that you have after the fact about VR, AR, if you're working with special needs populations or anybody in your school and would like some support, we're happy to jump in. And we appreciate you supporting us here during the webinar. So thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. The end of the school year is almost here. Hang strong, and we hope to see you soon. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.